$2.37. That is the exact cost of what I am about to show you. And somewhere inside the boardrooms of a $60 billion industry, executives are hoping you never watch this video to the end. Because what you are holding in your kitchen cabinet right now, what has been sitting next to your stove for years, can permanently erase rust from any metal surface. Tools, car parts, gates, pipes, bolts, hinges, gone. Clean metal, for less than the cost of a cup of coffee. Meanwhile, the same industry selling you $12, $20, $30 bottles of rust remover in bright orange packaging at every hardware store in America has spent decades making sure you believe one thing and one thing only, that rust is a death sentence for metal. It is not. It never was, and they know it. Welcome to the buried blueprint. If you believe corporations have buried solutions that should be free and available to every working American, hit subscribe and ring that bell right now. Because this channel exists for one reason, to dig up what they buried and hand it back to you. Now let us go back, way back, before the chemical industry existed, before the auto parts chains had a location on every corner, before every problem came with a product to buy. The year is 1917, the Western Front. American and Allied mechanics are working around the clock in field repair stations, trying to restore artillery pieces, rifle components, trench tools, and vehicle parts that have been exposed to rain, mud, and blood for months. There are no hardware stores. There are no chemical suppliers. There is no Amazon Prime delivery to the front lines of a world war. What they had was vinegar and salt. Military field manuals from that era, documents that still exist in archive collections across the country, describe a standard rust removal procedure using nothing more than white vinegar and table salt applied to corroded metal. Mechanics would submerge the rusted components in a bath of this mixture overnight. By morning, the rust was gone, the steel underneath, clean and intact, ready to be oiled and put back into service. This was not improvisation. This was industrial knowledge. Blacksmiths had used variations of acidic mineral baths for centuries before that. Victorian-era toolmakers in England used similar methods to restore cutting instruments. The science was understood, the method was proven, it worked then, and the chemistry has not changed since. So what happened? The 1950s happened. Post-war America. The rise of consumer culture, the birth of the modern marketing machine. Chemical corporations, flush with wartime manufacturing capacity and looking for peacetime revenue streams, entered the consumer cleaning and maintenance market with enormous force. They did not discover a better solution. They manufactured a perception. Through advertising, through retail partnerships, through the deliberate erosion of the trade knowledge that mechanics and craftsmen had passed down for generations, they convinced the American consumer that rust removal required a specialized, proprietary chemical formula. A formula only they could provide. A formula you would need to buy again and again and again. Here is what they never told you. The active chemistry in most commercial rust removers is phosphoric acid or oxalic acid, both of which are more aggressive, more toxic, and more expensive to produce than the simple acetic acid solution you get from vinegar and salt. The commercial version requires safety gloves, ventilation warnings, hazardous disposal instructions, and a price tag that reflects none of the actual cost of production and all of the cost of their marketing budget. The vinegar and salt solution, biodegradable, non-toxic, safe to handle, safe to dispose of down the drain, and it costs pennies per application. A professional restoration shop will charge you anywhere from $150 to over $2,000 to derust and treat metal components, depending on the size and complexity. A bottle of branded rust remover at the hardware store costs between $12 and $30 and is mostly water with a diluted acid and a dye to make it look like it is doing something dramatic. Before I give you the exact formula, I need to tell you something important. This is just one of the blueprints they buried. There are dozens of them. Home insulation hacks that can cut your energy bill by 40%. Waterproofing solutions used by the Navy that cost less than $5. Wood rot treatments that Victorian builders used for over 100 years before the lumber treatment industry buried them. All of it is documented in the complete buried blueprint vault, and the link is in the description below this video. Check it. Download it. Keep it somewhere safe. But stay right here, because exactly how you apply this changes everything. Now, the science. Because you deserve to understand why this works, not just that it works. Rust, at a chemical level, is iron oxide. It is what happens when iron reacts with oxygen and moisture over time. The molecular structure of rust is porous, brittle, and entirely different from the iron or steel beneath it. It is not the metal itself that is damaged. It is a layer sitting on top of the metal, bonded to it by that oxidation reaction. When you introduce acetic acid, which is the active compound in white distilled vinegar, to iron oxide, a chemical reaction occurs. The acetic acid breaks the ionic bonds holding the rust to the metal surface. It dissolves the iron oxide compound without attacking the iron itself, because healthy, non-oxidized iron has a significantly higher resistance to mild acetic acid than iron oxide does. The salt, sodium chloride, accelerates this process. It acts as an electrolyte, increasing the electrical conductivity of the solution and speeding up the ionic reaction between the acid and the rust. You are essentially creating a controlled, low-power electrochemical environment in a bowl on your workbench. The rust does not just get covered, it does not get painted over or masked. It gets dissolved at a molecular level, leaving the original metal surface clean, intact, and ready to be protected. Now, here is exactly how you do it. Go to any grocery store or dollar store, buy one large bottle of white distilled vinegar. Make absolutely sure it is white distilled vinegar, not apple cider vinegar, not cleaning vinegar with added surfactants, not balsamic, not rice vinegar. White distilled vinegar. It will cost you between $1 and $2 for a 32-ounce bottle. Then, grab a box of ordinary table salt. Standard iodized or non-iodized table salt, the kind in a blue cylindrical box. You probably already have this. If not, it costs less than $1. For the application, find a container large enough to fully submerge the rusted item. A glass baking dish, a plastic storage bin, a bucket. Pour in enough white vinegar to completely cover the object. Add 2 to 3 tablespoons of table salt per quart of vinegar and stir to dissolve. Submerge the rusted item completely. Make sure no part of the rusted surface is sticking out above the liquid. If needed, use a weight or another container on top to keep it submerged. Now wait. For light surface rust, 4 to 6 hours is typically sufficient. For heavy rust, deep pitting, or large items, leave it for 12 to 24 hours. Do not exceed 48 hours, as prolonged exposure can begin to affect some thinner metals. When you remove the item, you will see the rust has been converted into a black or dark brown residue that wipes away easily. Use a stiff brush, steel wool, or an old toothbrush to scrub it off under running water. Rinse thoroughly. Here is the step most people skip, and it is critical. Dry the metal immediately and completely. Use a cloth and then a heat source if necessary, a hair dryer, a heat gun, direct sunlight. Bare metal that is wet will begin oxidizing again within hours. Once dry, apply a thin coat of any mineral oil, WD-40, or machine oil to the surface. This creates a protective barrier against future oxidation. For tools and hardware, this is all you need. For automotive parts or outdoor fixtures, consider following up with a rust-inhibiting primer if you want a longer-term solution. That is it. That is the entire process. The item you are about to throw away, the wrench you thought was ruined, the gate hinge you priced at $60 to replace, the vintage tool you almost took to the scrapyard, is now clean, functional metal again. Total cost of the treatment, under $3. Total time, 1 day of passive soaking. A professional rust treatment service would have charged you between $150 and $2,000 for that same result, using a more toxic chemical process, packaged in a way designed to make you feel like you needed an expert. The auto parts industry generates over $60 billion per year in the United States. A meaningful portion of that revenue comes from replacement parts that never needed to be replaced, from components that were discarded because the consumer believed rust meant the end. They built that belief deliberately, carefully, over decades. They invested in it. And they are still investing in it every time you walk past the rust treatment aisle and see those bright orange bottles with the aggressive warning labels designed to make a simple chemistry problem look like a job for professionals. Now you know the chemistry. Now you know the history. Now you know the exact process. And that changes everything. If this video found you before you spent money on something you did not need to spend money on, share it. Send it to the person who just complained about a rusted hinge, or a corroded battery terminal, or a set of old tools sitting in the garage collecting rust. This knowledge survives by moving. Subscribe to The Buried Blueprint. Hit the bell, because the next blueprint opens soon, and what is inside is even heavier.